it's like you said, it's a combination of prepping as much as you can to expect that things are going to go wrong, and then kind of dealing it in the moment when things do.
There's so many moving parts. Like I said, we even have to deal with weather.
Yeah, exactly. That's one thing we can't control, the weather. Hello, and welcome to Colnaghi Talks. This episode, we are focusing on the art, operations, and logistics that happens behind the scenes here at Colnaghi. Today, I'm joined by Rupert, Sloane, and Zach Warboys from Regency Shipping. Zach, you are the MD of Regency Shipping, and Rupert, you are Head of Business Development.
Indeed.
And I am Madeleine Galbraith. I am Head of UK Operations here at Colnaghi. So thank you, first of all, for joining us here today and having a talk to us about quite a high-pressured but essential part of the art world, I think. And it largely happens behind the scenes, I think. For a lot of people, they don't know too much about it. So the point of this episode, we really wanted to kind of demystify it and discuss the choreography behind what really happens behind, you know, the movement of art globally and domestically to make exhibitions and displays happen. So the first thing I wanted to ask and to open up our conversation was, how did each of us find our way into this, into art logistics? Zach, I don't know, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll go first. So
I, like most people, kind of fell into logistics from a young age. I was 16 years old when I got my first job at Civil Logistics, which is a big freight forwarder. I then moved on to a company called Racer CMS, which, quite funny enough, they done the cataloguing for various auction houses. So I was shipping out the catalogues to various individuals. I then got went for an interview with Regency Shipping, filing, customs runs, just general run-of-the-mill stuff, nothing amazing, doing deliveries uptown. I then moved on to the import department, which I loved, dealing with operations, dealing with exhibitions. I then moved on to managing the key accounts for the two biggest auction houses in the world. And again, I love that. I love building the relationships, still got those relationships today. I then further moved on to client services director, because again, that was kind of my strengths. I really liked the relationship building of the job role. I enjoyed operations, but I enjoyed building relationships with the clients just that little bit more. And then most recently, March 2025, I got made the managing director of Regency Shipping. That's my story.
not that exciting.
And Rupert, was your story quite similar or different?
No, very different actually. I left university in the summer of 1990, and my godmother owned a jewellery shop on Bond Street, and I was chatting to her one day, and she said, "Well, why don't you just go into Sotheby's and see if they've got any summer jobs for you for 3 months?" So I started off as a porter at Sotheby's, and I was in the, actually, funny enough, in the old master paintings department as a porter, and then various different sort of departments within that. And so instead of the 3 months, I lasted 10 years. And I did 8 years in London, and then they sent me to Paris, where I lived for 2 years, working for Sotheby's Paris when the auction house opened after the route regulations changed so that external bodies could sell at auction within France, not just French auction houses. And when I was in Paris, I got heavily involved with the exhibition program, essentially for the high value sales that Sotheby's have worldwide, and that was my first interaction directly with other external shipping companies. So there was a company called Warboys that used to do all sort of the high value exhibition program. And I loved it. I loved the everything about the transport element of it, and moved from Sotheby's into a very small fine art shipping company in 2001, and then have moved within sort of the industry. I worked for various other different sort of shipping companies, and then joined Regency 8 years ago, and and run business development. So.
I think the thing, and it's similar with my story, there's no set career path really, is there, for art logistics? Yeah. And a lot of it, from my side, and also listening to you, is like you learn on the job. That's essentially it, right? It's you get to get one foot in the door, and then you learn as you go on. And I think that's really important to stay. And I think generally in the art world as well, there's no kind of clear kind of career path. But yeah, so all different paths kind of get you to where we are in the end.
Yeah.
Regency Shipping, we work really closely together with Colnaghi and Regency Shipping. And that close relationship between gallery and shipper, why is it so important, do you think, Rupert?
I think it's important for certainly the trust built up between the shipper and the gallery. I mean, I think as we touched on briefly before, there are always going to be problems, issues with transport. I mean, it's just the nature of the industry, and how you deal with those problems stands you out from the crowd. And I think the company very much focuses on its openness and transparency with clients, as you know. And that's why we feel that it's very important to us that we build very strong working relationships over a number of years with these clients. We do obviously storage, art fairs, import, export for the gallery. So we cover all the sort of aspects of the industry.
When you build a relationship with a gallery, for example, if you're the key account manager, you get to know their internal processes just as well as they know their internal processes. Yeah. So one thing I used to do with the key accounts I used to manage was I would know their value thresholds and all of their internal processes off by heart. So a shipment would come in a pre-alert, I would know that it's past the value threshold. So I would need to prep the witness offload, prep transport, this is going to be a special delivery, send them the notice of arrival. A couple hours later, they say, oh, can you book a witness offload on this? It's already done. Because I'm that way inclined with knowing your processes. And it's just about a relationship thing, really, because it's a two-way relationship. For example, if we had an issue internally and we needed to maybe ask if we could push a delivery to an extra day, you have that bit of leeway to just say, look, can you please help us out? We're a little bit busy, we've had a few absences. Is it possible to just push that delivery to the extra day?
Absolutely, and I think from the gallery side, from Colnaghi, it's such a big part of what we do, kind of the movement of artworks and the operations. We quickly worked out in 2025, Colnaghi did over 200 shipments domestically and globally. And, it's very easy to see exhibitions and displays at the end once they're all up and ready and public facing. But there is so much work that goes on behind the scenes to get them there. Yeah. And without that close relationship, like you were saying, it not only is difficult, sometimes it's impossible to get the end result that you're kind of after. I just think it's...
Yeah, one thing I wanted to sort of touch on is like you said, a lot of people, thousands of people go to exhibitions, galleries every year, but they never really give a thought as to how these artworks have got here, the logistical nightmares, the customs nightmares. So just a huge shout out recognition to all of the amazing registrars, shipping managers, shipping logistics clerks, and all the amazing art logistics companies that truly care about the art that they're moving. Because it is high pressure and it can get tough, and if you do truly care about the artwork that you move, you take that pressure internally as well. The after hours emails, the after hours text messages, making sure that you get the job done because you really care about your clients' artwork like it's their own.
And that beautifully segues to my next question, which was, at what point does shipping stop becoming transport and start becoming care?
I wanted to touch on this because I think personally there's no set point of when the artwork stops becoming transport and then becomes care. I think it's all about the logistics company you choose. So if you choose the right art logistics company, you'll get care and attention from start to finish. Yeah. It's not really a set point in my mind where I think, okay, now we need to care about it, if you know what I mean. It's more from start to finish, we will treat the shipment like it's our own artwork.
Yeah, and we said earlier, I think one of the, I came up with this thing. So transport is for freight forwarders, care is for fine art shippers. Okay. Is what I came up with, which I think is... Yeah, no, I think I quite like it actually. But it's, no, as Zach said, I mean, I think, we are representing the gallery in front of all your clients that you sell, these high value artworks to. They all have their demands. So I think we are, yeah.
Yeah, and I think from the gallery side of it, the care that we have to give these pieces from the get-go is immense. We are not just doing, oils and canvases and boards. We're doing terracotta, we're doing marble, we're doing really intricate sculptural work that care has to be done in every step of the process. So that is packaging, crating, coming up with kind of inventive crating solutions, so things are protected properly, through to, you know, at the other end of things, working out together how we're going to display it, whether that's a reinforced plinth or, you know, working out the best way. I know at TEFAF last year, we had a very heavy sculpture that we had to work out what best machinery essentially could we kind of unload it and display it onto the reinforced plinth. And it's looking at things like that, you know, what's the best outcome and what's the best process to protect the artwork as kind of like the main priority.
Especially with you know with the you know when the sort of artists you represent in the time. So most of your art has been was done 500 years ago.
Yes.
So you know what I mean. We have that duty of care to maintain that. So in another 500 years, you know, hopefully artworks will be in the same condition. But yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll just go back slightly. You know, we spoke a little bit about kind of timetables and deadlines and making them, and you know, inevitably having delays somewhere. But I wanted to ask generally, and we can discuss this a bit more, how far in advance do we, kind of together, usually start planning a complex or high value shipment, to give people an idea of how you know, long the process is?
I think with art fairs, especially, you know, taking TFAP, which is obviously in March, I think we started talking about it really in January. So we're looking at a couple of months really for, I think for international art fairs outside of, you know, air freight ones, I think even more in advance. But two months, I think, is what we normally get for a high value shipment. Although, as you know, things will crop up very, very last minute, and then you have to react to those changes and the new updates as well. So, I mean, ideally, you know, I think for an art fair, especially in a larger sort of consignment, we're looking at a couple of months, I think.
Yeah, it also depends on what customs formalities are involved as well, in terms of how much pre-planning we need to actually do, depending on what shipment.
Absolutely. And you touched on kind of art fairs and multi-leg kind of journeys. For me, as you were saying, it's the pre-planning of multi-leg shipments, right? So if you're doing it globally, where it's coming in from, let's say, Italy to Belgium to London to then go over to TFAF, it's working backwards almost, right? So you know the end result and the hard deadlines, and you're working back. And for something like a multi-leg shipment that goes through, you know, numerous countries, you have multiple stages of export licenses of different crating requirements. So if we're, you know, having artwork on an EU truck, it's probably potentially okay soft packed, but as soon as we start speaking about air freight, you know, it obviously needs a crate, and it's factoring in kind of all of that. So you have deadlines for each stage, so you know you're going to make the end one.
Yeah, I think with most shipping companies, I think obviously we have a you know, a very sort of thorough network of international agents that we work with who are equally at that level that we are. We have to, you know, rely on them to a certain extent but we always sort of factor in, you know, we always try to look at what issues could arise. And I think that's really important because, you know, especially when you've got a multi-leg shipment coming in from different areas, you've obviously got to think about the customs delays that could happen, not always happen, but trying to factor in time that could be lost within that shipment is always a good plan.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions on my list was, you know, delays inevitably, as we said, do arise, and how do we work around that? How do we build flexibility?
And there's only so much planning you can do for that. You know, you can do all the planning that you want, and then the freighter gets delayed, it gets stuck in Luxembourg for 5 days, and then you're scrambling around trying to get a dedicated truck to Luxembourg to get it packed. So there's only so much planning you can do. However, we will look at the shipment as a whole in terms of the customs formalities, whether it needs to be sent to a European hub for us to collect. And these are all factors that mean that we need to add on an extra couple of days just as a grace period. But sometimes, as you know, those grace periods very quickly diminish. And then everyone's scrambling and running around.
I was just thinking most recently, we obviously did, Colnaghi did master drawings over in New York. And it was like the worst week of weather I think New York has seen in a long time, and inevitably a lot of the flights were delayed or cancelled. Luckily, just as standard practice, we try to get everything to an exhibition, to an internal exhibition 2 weeks before, just so that we preempt that. And luckily, because of that, even though our flights got delayed, we got everything there and kind of on the walls for the first day of the fair. And it's like you said, it's a combination of prepping as much as you can to expect that things are going to go wrong, and then kind of dealing it in the moment when things do.
There's so many moving parts. Like I said, we even have to deal with weather.
Yeah, exactly. That's one thing we can't control, the weather. And for the, we touched on art fairs, for the high pressure moments, and I want to speak about art fairs slightly further. What is the most challenging aspect of an art fair from your side of things?
Post-Brexit, it's definitely the customs side of things. And, the rules and regulations, especially this year, again, with TFAF, have come in with new rules about the import of ancient items, etc. So that is a change that's come into force that no gallery had to do before. And I think it really is that's the main problem, I think. We're obviously within the EU. I think that it's sort of customs that, could hold you up. But again, then you're trying to factor in, like, for instance, for TFAF this year, we are leaving on the Thursday night, so that we can preempt. Like last year, there was an issue with the border control customs last year, and lots of shippers got stuck. So this is again factoring in additional time. Although it will cost us more money, we have to send guys out early. We obviously hotels and trucks and things like that, but we factor that in so that the actual process is as easy as it possibly can be.
And I think maybe potentially in the long term, saving money, because if you're then doing kind of rush things at the end and paying costs that are kind of exaggerated because of your tight deadlines, it probably works out better in the end.
Yeah, and I think also with art fairs, it's obviously galleries want to keep the stock in the gallery for as long as they possibly can, in case someone comes in and wants to buy something. So it's really dealing with your requirements in terms of what you're expecting from us as well, and us giving you the absolute deadline we can do that, so that our processes, our customs, our packing, our preparation can be factored into the timeline.
I think from a company point of view, it's also the amount of assets and resources it takes whilst we're servicing these fairs, because we still have to service all of the other clients that are not going to be at TFAF, and that doesn't stop. So we'll have a certain amount of technicians, a certain amount of drivers, a certain amount of trucks that are completely gone for that week. So that puts additional stress on operations. So from a company point of view, it's more assets and resources that it takes.
That's it, isn't it? It's just the absolute kind of wealth of work that it brings with it. As you know, we have 2 stands there most years, so Colnaghi and Colnaghi Elliott Master Drawings, and from that we have a large shipment coming with you guys in from the UK, but we also have shipments from Belgium. We have individual works coming in from Italy, and it's juggling all of those to arrive at the same time and all be prepped to arrive at the same time.
And then also working out after the fair
where things are going back to, exactly. They don't just appear and disappear. Unfortunately, it would be a much easier job if they did. But it's all about kind of forethought that goes around it. Rupert, you touched briefly on kind of customs considerations and how we think about getting things in and out individual countries, let alone gallery to gallery within a country. Again, at what stage in the process do we consider that?
The very start, to be honest, for me, especially if we're talking CITES, export licenses, these all need to be considered imminently, as soon as we are aware of it. Especially for imports, if we get pre-alerted and we see that there's CITES material, we'll tell them to hold the shipment until we get everything in order in terms of the import CITES. We'll cross-reference the export CITES. Once that's all in order, we'll give them the green light to ship, because it's very zero tolerance on CITES. So we need to make sure that's all good. Same with carnets as well. So I would say immediately, as soon as the shipment books, we're already thinking and our brains are already processing, right, how are we going to arrange this from a customs point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. As you know, alongside the physical planning and the movement, this tax status that each artwork has is, you know, incredibly important from the gallery side, from the shipper side of things. And you know, we won't go into it in too much detail, but there's so many different options, you know, just in the UK, and then as you were saying, kind of throughout Europe, whether it's TA or bond or UK free circulation or EU free circulation. And I think, as you were saying, Rupert, part of this job is to stay on top of the changes as well to the legislation. And some of that's, you know, benefits us, some of it's positive. The recent increase of, you know, the temporary admission in the UK, 4 years rather than 2. You know, that was very well received by galleries and the industry in the UK. But as you were saying, kind of there's new kind of European rules coming in for imports. Obviously, the recent US change in tariffs and stuff like that. So how do you, from your side, make sure your company stays on top of all the changes?
For us, we've got an in-house customs team, so a little bit separate to other art shippers who outsource their customs work. We have our own customs team in-house, and we always have done. So we're naturally keeping on top of customs as it's part of our job role. It's where Regency originated. We were a customs broker. So all of those experts are keeping up to date with the customs tariffs anyway, because it's part of our job, because we're an AEO registered agent. So it's in our best interest to keep that up to date, because we are enforced to keep that up to date. But yeah, it's like in terms of customs, Brexit was a big one. I know that Brexit affected a lot of restorers, because previously their clients could send stuff from the EU and they could just send it freely, but now they can't, so they have to utilise an IPR account, an agent's IPR account, similar to Regency's. We've got a lot of restorers that utilise our IPR for the sole purpose so they don't have to lose their European clients that they serviced, because otherwise their European clients were having to pay taxes on the way in and then reverse taxes on the way out.
Just while you say that, actually, just to make it clear, maybe some viewers are, you know, aren't kind of au fait with some of this.
Yes.
But can you just explain kind of what a TA or a bond or you know, one of these accounts means in terms of the tax status and the shipping?
Of course. So temporary admission is the process of being able to bring works in for, let's say, in this realm, an exhibition. So they can stay on TA, and the VAT liability is not payable at the time of import. So it can be essentially waived for up to 4 years, most recently. And that allows galleries, auction houses, overseas clients to send stuff and not have to pay the taxes on the way in, because the goods actually might not be staying in the UK. So they're not penalised for bringing them in because they might actually not stay here. So it's essentially how this industry operates. Most people are importing under temporary admission. You get some museums which will operate a NIRA account. So that essentially allows them to import goods into the UK under their NIRA account, and it can stay indefinitely on that account, and they don't have to pay taxes on it because it's for the purpose of a museum. You've then got a bonded warehouse. So bonded warehouse is utilised for storing goods for an imminent amount of time, and you don't have to pay the taxes when you store those goods, but when those goods can't be released from that bond. But when they are released, either taxes have to be paid or they have to be exported, or we can do what's called a diversion. So we divert those goods from bonded warehouse to another regime like temporary admission. I know nobody's probably following with this. And an IPR account. So IPR, inward processing relief. It's when goods can come into the UK for restoration, scientific research, conservation. Again, in this industry, in this realm, we utilise it for restoration, framing, scientific research, and they can come into the UK. Depending on your authorisation, we have 6 months, but other restorers have 1 year. So they can work on it as for up to 1 year without having to pay duties and taxes, and then they can decide what they want to do. They can transfer it and pay the taxes, keep it in the UK, or they can export it back to the owner, for example.
Basically, there's lots of options. And you know, one of the reasons we were talking before about such a close, you know, gallery shipper relationship is that, you know, these have to be done. You know, one of the customs has to be followed one way or another. You know, you can't just have, you can't just bring art, kind of in a way that you want to do it. You have to follow the rules. And in working together, we find the right solutions, and hopefully make everyone happy, including the government.
Well, the regulations
It's always changing, so it's very hard to keep up sometimes, because especially from a client's point of view, because the clients will still feel like they can do what they could have done 2 years prior, and now you have to explain that the rules have actually changed, so you can't do that, and now it's going to cost you X amount more to actually import this.
But everyone has to.
Yeah, it's a very difficult conversation that you have to sometimes have.
Exactly. And something I wanted to touch on as well, I think it would be weird if we didn't speak about it, is sustainability in the industry. You know, the most talked about thing in every industry at the moment. And I wanted to speak about kind of what we do in our, in Regency itself, but also in our relationship, that, we encourage sustainability in a way that we can still, hit our timelines and get the outcomes that we want and, need to be achieved. Yeah.
I think it's obviously a very hot topic at the moment. I think Regency are there's materials which can be used. There's a sort of mode of transport. I think a lot of galleries are looking at sea freight options now. Obviously, that comes with delays in itself. So again, pre-planning is essential for anything like that. I think galleries are trying to use them for art fairs, but again, it's that question of the art is on the water for really 3 months, 2 to 3 months. So out of stock, you can't sell it, etc. So there's the balance there. Regency are also a member of the Rockbox Loop, which is Rockbox is the crate. So normally we would use wooden crates for shipping, and obviously those would be used once, and then either the crate remains with the artwork, or the artwork is delivered and the crate is essentially destroyed. Rockbox came into play 5 or 6 years ago, wasn't it? Something like that, and which is a more sustainable way, different type of materials used, although that comes at a higher cost. And it sometimes actually increases the freight cost as well, because the boxes are sort of big. So there's only certain sizes that can be used at the moment. So if you've got a small artwork, you have to put it into a rock box, which is probably 3 times bigger than it actually should be. So that's quite difficult at the moment. We're working very hard to try to encourage people to use those. But the Rockbox Loop is a new a sort of system that's been set up internationally with 6 or 7 different shipping companies who all have invested into the Rockbox Loop program. So you can, for instance, ship an artwork from London to New York, and the Rockbox would then, the artwork would remain in the Rockbox, go to the final delivery point, unpacked, and then the empty Rockbox sent back to a shipping company who's within the loop, and then in theory it comes back to the UK. So it's used 10 or 15 times. Materials, again, is key, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, Regency have always tried to stay at the forefront of sustainability, and I'm happy that it's now becoming more of a conversation, and a lot more galleries, auction houses are now taking that on board. Whereas for Regency, we've always tried to stay at the forefront, i.e. we got the electric Luton art vehicle that does the Bond Street run. We're a carbon neutral company. We've got our ISO 14001 certification, so there's naturally things in-house we need to abide by to make sure we're doing things in the most sustainable method. So we've always really been trying to push sustainability, because ultimately for us, I know it's quite hard for galleries and auction houses to find a sustainable alternative to the way they ship, but for us it's more, if you was to utilise Regency shipping, the packing materials that we use in, the mode of transport that we use in, will naturally lower your CO2 emissions anyway. So we're trying to make it easily accessible to galleries and auction houses to become more sustainable without them having to do too much internal work.
Absolutely. I think from our side, you said the reuse of materials, art fairs are a great example of that. Everything has to come in with some sort of packing, soft packing, and kind of keeping those and reusing those even just for the return journey, for example, rather than, bringing out a whole new kind of set of soft packing. Small, it sounds small, but things like that really do add up. And the crating, you were talking about kind of the crating there, but I know in your warehouse at the moment we have lots of empty crates, and that is a decision made by the gallery, to try and reuse these materials as much as possible rather than kind of doing a one and done. And not always is that the most cost effective for us, storage versus new fabrication of crates. But it just seems like, the best thing to do for us to kind of move forward. And the big one, is consolidated shipments, especially in air freight. The forethought of kind of moving 2 or 3 exhibitions worth of things overseas or on a plane rather than one. Obviously, that's one journey instead of 3. Comes with problems, trying to do things in advance as far as possible. But we will always do that. And for something like that, while it has, a positive on the sustainability side, it also helps us in terms of operationally, in terms of, as we were talking about, kind of wiggle room for things. So not always, I find it as kind of operations and sustainability fighting against each other. There are ways we can do it where it kind of, works both ways as well. To kind of end on, these interviews, we always try to look at something positive and look at kind of where the next steps are. And we've spoken a lot kind of like where you started in your careers, what's happening now. But I wanted to ask recently, or maybe in the last couple of years, what changes in the industry, either kind of technological or operational, do you think have really changed it and improved it for the better? It can be in-house, it can be, it can be...
I mean, I think health and safety for us is a big part. And I think it's helped concentrate people's minds on the pitfalls that can occur when you're especially mine actually, when you've been in this industry for such a long time, and the recent changes are very sort of dissimilar to what you're used to when 15, 20 years ago. I think it brings, I think it's important that it's about looking after your employees much more nowadays, I think, and it's making sure that we take on jobs that we know we can do well. We don't take on jobs we can't do well. And I think also obviously the AI recently has come in. I mean, you're very keen on that sort of.
Yeah, I mean, technology, I'll be looking at that in the near future just to see if we can automate a few processes internally. I'm not going to go too crazy. You're not going to be talking to a robot. But yeah, like as Rupert said, for us operationally, it's really just doing the jobs that we know we are really good at, and sometimes getting better at saying no at the jobs that we know we're not the best at. We're not the best at everything. We know that. There are other art shippers out there that deal with huge 10-ton sculpture installations. That's not us. Might be one day, but it's not us at the moment. So we would much rather give the advice to whoever the client is and say, we're not the right people for that job. However, we are the right people for this type of work, and we enjoy doing that, and we know we're very good at that, and we can give an amazing service for that. But there are some things that we don't specialise in.
Yeah, I think more generally, we spoke about kind of technology in terms of databasing artworks instead in terms of tracking shipments. That's such a big jump and benefit for shippers and clients alike.
Absolutely, because you can then react quicker to any sort of questions that your client has. I think we are working very hard at the moment internally to we've obviously got a sort of new systems coming in place, haven't we?
Yeah, we're working on the warehouse management system, so that's going to be hopefully ready in August. It's being built at the moment, so we're being able to tailor that to what we believe our clients will need from us in terms of a storage perspective, and give them a much more detailed overview of what they have in stock with us, pictures, images, descriptions, values. So it's going to be a lot more interactive for the clients that store with us.
I think it's a combination, right, of all this kind of new jumps, new technology, but also being able to pick up the phone and speaking to people. And some problems are just sorted out by speaking to someone on the phone.
I love speaking on the phone.
We had a shipment last year where we couldn't pick up an artwork in Venice because the boat we had booked was too big to get down the canal. And for that, the only kind of solution was to pick up the phone and speak to people to find a smaller boat. And it's, it's a job that we spoke about before where, you've got to be able to turn and find solutions.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things I love about this industry, actually, is that we have, as we touched on before, we have a network of international agents who are all in a similar situation to us.
All in the same boat.
But all exactly, but all know how to. We rely very heavily on our US agents to know the rules and regulations, going back to tariffs, etc. But also to advise us on how to complete a shipment, in a timely manner. But also, if there is a problem, then they come up with a solution. They know how to solve a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely, and each shipment, it's not just one shipper and one client. It's usually 2 clients, 3 shippers, an owner. There's lots of not only moving parts but parties in it as well that deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to encourage people to pick up the phone, especially when it's urgent. Just pick up the phone, call the agent. There's some agents that I can call them any hours of the day, and they will pick up and they'll give me an answer. Even a quotation over the phone, and that's just so valuable from a partner, because I do that for them. They can call me at 11 p.m. at night, as long as my phone's not on airplane mode, because I go to bed at 10. And I'll give them an answer, I'll give them the estimation, and then I'll follow it up in the next morning.
Brilliant. And I guess the last thing, what are you hopeful, looking forward to in the industry? What, you spoke about AI briefly, but, are you excited to see where it's going? If we have this conversation again in 10 years' time, what do you think we'll be talking about?
I don't know, actually. It's a great question.
I think some of it is the same forever, right?
Yeah.
Some of it, as we said, relationships, some processes, I can't imagine changing.
More automation. I hope there's more automation to do with customs formalities. The recent update with CITES is great. Applying for CITES is a lot easier now than it previously was. Carnets are now becoming digital, so that's a lot easier. Hopefully we'll see that sort of translate into other aspects of customs, because even from the customs entries point of view, I'm constantly looking at how to automate customs entries.
But it's getting there. Even UK export licenses have moved online now.
Exactly.
Finally, rather than literally having to post them in, the applications and stuff like that.
We have a shipment for a client at the moment that involves 144 export licenses.
Wow. I bet they're very happy they don't have to post it in.
Which is out of the ordinary, but I mean, it just shows you what is involved in a shipment like that.
Yeah. Well, whatever it looks like in 10 years, we're still going to be here. Exhibitions, displays can't happen without operations. As we said, even though this all happens behind the scenes, it's a very, very big part of the our industry, and we're here to stay.
100%. People are always going to need to move things from A to B.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Not at all. And we really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yes, brilliant. Thanks very much.